Welcome back to Wounded for War. This morning, we're going to talk about power again. We've been talking about power. We've been staying on that subject. And the Lord keeps leading me to different facets to it. And this morning, what we're going to look at is the story of a guy named Joab. And in particular, with Joab, we learn that power is also something that we gain through community. That God does work in miracles. And there are seasons where that's needed. And then there's seasons where God just raises up community, and that being the source of power that he works through. And so we want to look at that today. Grab your Bibles, grab a cup of coffee, tea, whatever, and let's sit down and just dive in. I will warn you, I'm going to butcher some names in here because I am not... I'm from 2020 right now, and these people were given these names thousands of years ago. And so I'm sure they pronounced them different. Apologies to these people, though they are long dead. In 2 Samuel chapter 10, we're going to start from there. We're going to see this guy named Joab. We're going to see a story where King David basically uses Joab, takes him as one of the main guys that he entrusts to go into battle and defend David's kingdom. We're going to see that that individual, though he has all the resources, he's going to need to delegate some authority, and he's going to find community in his own brother. And in his own brother, he's going to trust that when his back is against the wall, that his brother's got his back in a way that's going to make a big difference to whether he wins the battle or loses the battle. And so let's dive in. In verse 1, chapter 2, 2 Samuel chapter 10, verse 1. Sometime later, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun became king in his place. Then David said, I'll show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. So David sent his emissaries to console Hanun concerning his father. However, when they arrived in the land of the Ammonites, the Ammonite leaders said to Hanun, their lord, just because David has sent men with condolences for you, do you really believe he's showing respect to your father? Instead, hasn't he sent his emissaries in order to scout out the city, spy on it, and demolish it? So Hanun took David's emissaries, shaved off half of their beards, cut off their clothes in half at the hips, and sent them away. Basically, David has a situation where he's sending condolences because this king that has died was a great help to him at one point. And so he wants to show his respects. Only his respects are misconstrued by the other leaders, as David was known as a king that would overtake areas and reap all the benefits by pillaging and taking all the plunder, right? So they're a little bit worried, but at the same token, David's heart is in the right place. And yet we'll find out, unfortunately, sometimes when your heart's in the right place, people will misconstrue it. And this is what happens. When you look at the next portion in verse 5, it says, when this was reported to David, he sent someone to meet them. Since they were deeply humiliated, I would be too. They cut off their robe at a point where you could see their nakedness below the waist. And on top of that, as you can tell, I take great pride in my beard. And these guys took great pride in their beards. That was part of manhood. And basically, they shaved it off. And what they did is they took away their manhood. And these guys are coming back with their tail between their legs. They are, as it says, deeply humiliated. Then the king said, stay in Jericho until your beards grow back, then return. David's trying to give him back some semblance of dignity. Verse 6, when the Ammonites realized they had become repulsive to David, they hired 20,000 foot soldiers from the Arameans of Beth Rahab and Zobah, 1,000 men from the king of Maacah, and 12,000 men from Tob. So basically this guy responds he listens to his leaders, and this new king listens to his leaders, and what does he do? He makes a rash decision against David's men and then realizes, oh crap, this is an act of war. I better prepare myself. So immediately it goes from David wanting to share in a kind way his affection and love and care for someone turns into a war. Ever had that happen? Ever tried to do something kind for someone and it only backfires on you to turn into a full-fledged battle? That's where he's at. Let's see how it turns out, though. David heard about it and sent Joab and all the elite troops. The Ammonites marched out and lined up in battle formation at the entrance of the city gate, while the Arameans of Zobah and Rahab and the men of Tob and Maacah were in the fields by themselves. When Joab saw that there was a battle line in front of him and another behind him, he stuck. They're in front of him and they're behind him. This is a bad position to be in when you're in battle. He chose some of Israel's finest young men and lined up in formation to engage the Arameans. He placed the rest of the forces under the command of his brother Abishai. They lined up in formation to engage the Ammonites. Notice that he immediately took and delegated some authority when the battle became overwhelming. He identified, what resources do I have? What friends do I have? Who's my greatest ally? How can I divide up my efforts? It goes on to say in verse 11, if the Arameans are too strong for me, Joab said, then you will be my help. However, if the Ammonites are too strong for you, I'll come help you. What a plan. The guy actually lays out how if there's two battles raging, he's going to need some help. So he grabs his brother and he says, hey, let's divide up the resources. Let's work together against our common enemy. As he does that, he gives an encouraging word. Don't worry, you're not on your own. I'll be there if you start to lose your battle. If I start to lose my battle, you'll be there. Now you have a winning recipe. And then he gives the motivation. Be strong. Let's prove ourselves strong for our people and for the city of our God. May the Lord's will be done. So we see the situation. It's a dire circumstance. David didn't ask to be in trouble. This was just brought on by circumstance. It was a misunderstanding, yet it's a full-fledged war now. In this case, David is getting rejected, even though he's showing kindness. His own people are feeling humiliated and deeply humiliated. I mean, it was a bad situation. They didn't deserve it. It's an act of war. This guy starts to realize he's now in a position, in a place where he's in deep trouble. Joab. So this recipe turns into a situation where basically what we realize is a lot like today, hurt people hurt people. Let me say that again. People that have been hurt want to in turn hurt other people. This guy feels like these leaders and this king, this new king in this land, he's hurting. His father just died. He's got all this pressure of this new kingdom, this new lifestyle. Everything's changed for him. His world as he knew it, where daddy was taking care of the kingdom and he just was the prince. He's running around reaping the rewards, having fun. Now the pressure's on. Now the season's changed. Now everything that was comfortable is no longer comfortable. He has to make hard decisions. He listens to some leaders. By the way, they weren't good leaders. They made some poor choices and it put him in a bad situation. But nonetheless, he's there. Joab's on the receiving side of that, and he's looking and he's saying, I got an allegiance to my king. I got to take care of that. I have my people at home, and I'm in the midst of this situation where the guys that have gone out came back humiliated, and I'm going out next. Doesn't look like a bright situation. I mean, if I'm being real, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. But he does something wise. He looks around and he realizes he's in over his head. He sees the battle in the front and he sees the battle behind him. And he recognizes, I can't be in two places at once. I can't do two things at one time. I can't do everything. So he does the one thing that seems wise in the moment. He divides the troops in a way that makes sense to him. It's just using the brain that God gave you. Sometimes that's logic is just something that God has given you as a general gift. Monkeys don't have it. We do. We have a higher intellect. We can reason and use our rationale for things that are needed in the moment. And that's what this guy does. He uses his natural giftings. But then his motivation, I think, is a big factor. He says, for our people, for the cities of our God, we need to what? Be strong. He has a motivation. What kind of motivation do you have? What's your motivation in life? I'll be honest, there's been seasons in my life where I look and I go, you know what? I'm not very motivated by the things I see. I'm not very motivated by the circumstances or, being real. Oftentimes, about the only motivation I have is not even God. It's my family, my love for my children, my love for my wife. Because they're the individuals that I've seen as they love me no matter what. They really do. There's a deep passion, a deep love there. But what's funny about that is you would think that, as a pastor, you're going to hear someone say, well, God's my motivation. Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection. Yeah, those are motivating. But at times when it doesn't seem like God's there, and I'll be honest, let's be real. In this COVID, the season, it doesn't feel like God's there, does it? If we're being honest. He is. But sometimes the way that you're going to see that is in hindsight. You're going to look back, you're going to recognize that God put resources, people. He's rebuilding something right now in the season. He's tearing down the old and he's rebuilding anew. So we're in uncharted territories. What does that mean? We're not going to be in a familiar area. We can't meet together as a church. One of the biggest struggles I've had lately is actually the fact that when you can't meet with people, ironically, before the COVID thing happened, I kind of walked away from one of the churches that I was at and helping out lead and teaching and whatnot. But then, as I started to look for other churches, there wasn't a big sense of community. I have this small Saturday morning group that I go to that are a good group of guys, but and I'm sure I could call on them if I needed something. But there's a sense that with the old model of church, you could go to a church and really never be known. Ever feel that way? Like you walk into this big room full of people and yet you walk in wanting to be known and loved, and you walk out not being known and not feeling loved. And I know that there are churches and places out there that are doing that well, but by and large, that's not the case. So, as we're in this season, I've been asking myself, man, I could still study your word. I could still pray. I could still seek you, God. But what I'm lacking the most is community. Now, in this season of putting out these videos and doing church in a new way before church even got shut down, for me at least, what I've learned and found in this season was a few individuals rose to the surface. One, a guy from Pakistan, Arfan Morris. Arfan Morris is a really neat individual. He's a guy who watched the videos and then became a friend through that. And though I've never been able to go to Pakistan and meet him in person, we've done a lot of communication on a weekly basis, and we've supported them, and he supports us. And I got to be honest, there's times where I've needed support. I've been in the battle, and I've needed support, and it came through different avenues. Arfan was one of them. Another guy by the name of Will Rollins, neat guy. From the South, black guy, a lot of charisma and character, and just a very hurt person too. All of us are. We have our pains and our sorrows that we bring to the table, and we have our character and joy in the Lord as well. Both of those guys, as well as my father-in-law and my wife, are a few individuals. These are all individuals in my life that God has placed strategically in for a season in specific places that I would actually lean into that community so that I would thrive and win the battle. What battles are you dealing with right now? Where do you need to lean in? What people have you got around you? And I know. If you're like me, you can lean towards, Lord, you've not put anybody. Months ago, that's where I was. Where are you, Lord? I just need you, Lord. Or there's nobody around, Lord. That's kind of the tone and tenor, but you kind of have to look right around you and seek out. Maybe the first step is asking the Lord, what resources do I have in the community? I'm going to offer some at the end of this as well, but for those that don't have any. But I will say, usually God has placed something around you. You just haven't looked hard enough to find it. Now, in my case, I have mental struggles that I deal with often, and I just want to give some examples. Not of the mental struggles. You don't need that. Nobody wants that. But I do struggle with depression and anxiety quite often. And in that case, God has put Arfan and Will. And the reason I say that is because, interestingly enough, right when I'm doing my worst, I get a text message from Will, or I get a word of encouragement from Will, or Arfan will hit me up in the morning. Hey, how you doing? Where are you at? How are things going? And those are lifelines, because here's the thing. In that moment, what I need to know, if I'm in depression or in anxiety, I need to know that someone cares, that I'm not alone in this battle. When you feel alone, that equals hopelessness. And I got to tell you, that is a very scary place to be. But when someone reaches out and says, hey, I care, I love you, are you okay? That's just a starting point, but it's the starting point where someone's pulling you out of the mire, out of the muck, out of the mud. With real life issues like my truck breaks down or something like that, there's been times where Will, and he's not a rich man. He's not a rich man, but he has offered multiple times, hey man, do you need money? I gotta tell you, I love Will, but I And I look at him and I go, he doesn't have much. Why would I take some from? But here's the thing. He's actually being more like Christ in that moment than anybody I've run across. He doesn't have much, but he's willing to give anything he has. That's amazing. That's when you know that you have someone that's there for you, and not just in the good times, no matter what it takes. Problems with injustice. Problems with injustice. You know, when things go wrong and you didn't deserve it. Like David. David didn't do anything wrong. He actually had a good heart behind what he was trying to do. He sent his guys over there to console him. And all of a sudden, you know, all chaos. That's problems with injustice, right? In those cases for myself, Arfin really has shown that he's caring and that he loves me, and that I just see, and I'm reminded sometimes as well, that he's caring for these kids and these widows over in Pakistan. He has a ministry that he's in charge of, and he's caring for these people, and injustice has happened to them. And I realize this is a man who has a heart after God's own heart. And it encourages me, strengthens me. How about when I have PTSD triggers? When I have PTSD triggers, I got to tell you, there's nobody like my wife that's connected to me like that. When literally in the moment where I'm having the worst triggers and I'm at work and nobody else knows, and it's just an internal anxiety and I'm panicking and freaking out, what happens? I get a text from my wife. Hey, praying for you today. I wish I could just show you all of them. There's just one after the next throughout days. And those days correlate identically with the struggle that I've been having in the moment. My wife will text. How about loss of a home? You know, we went through this beginning of the COVID thing. I started to realize right away, I didn't want to go through 2008 all over again, where we lost everything. And we've lost everything multiple times in our life. Lost our home, lost our cars, it's happened a lot of times. And in this case, Dar, my wife's father, he is a man who is very giving, very open with his resources, and that God has entrusted him to. And he has a big, beautiful home, and all of this house that you see, that I'm in the little barn area right now, but he's opened his home to us. You know, it's him and his wife, and he took in a family of 5, and that is being there, someone being there for their brother in a time of need. Being there for their brother. You know, Joab called on his brother. Joab grabbed his brother and said, hey, you know, I need help. Here's a resource, a bunch of men, and here's how we're going to do it. And he made a plan, and it panned out in a way where that battle was won in the moment. And you know, there's scripture that leans to this whole concept, and it's found in Galatians 6, verse 2. It says, bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. Bear one another's burdens. Bear one another's burdens. I get the command, bear one another's burdens. But then it goes on and says, and thereby fulfill, complete the law of Christ. You know, there was 2 laws. There was the law of Moses, the 10 commandments that, you know, the Jews knew that if they would adhere to those, they were righteous before God, but nobody was able to adhere to them perfectly. They were specifically, intentionally made that way so that we would recognize our need for Christ. And in this moment, what he's saying is he's appealing to the law of Christ, not Moses. Why is that? Because he said to love your God with all your heart, to love others as you love yourself. So, to love others as you love yourself. Bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. When we are doing that, we are most like Christ. Why? Because he bore your burdens. He bore my burdens. He came down from heaven, went on a cross, and took and paid the penalty that we couldn't pay so that we could gain the righteousness that he had. He made an exchange. He bore our burden of the penalty so that we could bear the reward of his perfectness, his righteousness, his right standing with the Father. So when we bear one another's burdens, we're most like Christ. How are you bearing someone's burden right now? Do you have opportunity to be like Christ in that way? Do you need maybe someone to do that for you, to bear your burdens? Well, I would like to offer this opportunity as I think a window to expand this whole thing that God has me doing with the videos. I've wondered, how do I build community, Lord? How do I, the one part of church that we're missing is community. How do we build that? And I don't want to be fake or just put something together. I want it to be birthed out of what he wants to do. And so as I was praying through that this morning, the thoughts came to my mind that if you guys want to text in or Facebook message me, it's a little hard for me to think that I can just have people send all this in and then I bear the burden of loving you. There's more of you than I can love in one moment. But what we can do is we can love one another. The Bible talks about the pastors being individuals that are supposed to build up and edify the body, that you are the body of Christ, and that I'm supposed to be teaching in a fashion that leads you to maturity. And what does that maturity look like? That you would actually become more like Christ, that you would learn how to do the work of the ministry. We're there for the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry. So what I thought we'd do is my phone number, my cell number is 206-602-9003. 206-602-9003. That's my cell phone. Text me a prayer request or a need, or instant message me on Facebook. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to post them on hopelinkchurch.com. It's a website that I built a while back when I was thinking about building a church, and we're going to use it now. And the reason why is because what we're going to do is I'm going to put a page on there where it's needs of people, and I'll put as much as you want or as little as you want on there. But what we want to do is we want to see some interaction of one another bearing one another's burdens. So I'll put the need up there, but then with the follow-up to that, as you check in or you have a heart to, maybe you're the one with the need, we'll post it. You're the one without the need and you want to meet the need, then keep an eye on hopelinkchurch.com and look for that segment where we're going to have needs, and I'm going to post them. You meet the need. Get in contact with us. Let us know that you want to meet the need through the cell number or through the Facebook Messenger, and we'll post that. I want you to be encouraged to see that there's a need and then there's someone meeting the need. Now, I know the Bible says, do not let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. Nobody knows you on this forum. Don't worry about it. Don't be so legalistic or so caught up in such a way that you miss the opportunity to meet someone's need, to be Christ, to be Jesus to somebody. So, I love you guys. I hope this was encouraging to you. Come back next week for more. Last week I didn't put one out. Why? Because I was depressed. because I was in a dark place and I spent time with my family over the weekend instead of making a message. I was in need. The Lord exposed last week. He used that to expose that you need more support. You need more prayer. Now, the beautiful thing is I got a full-time job, so I financially take care of myself. That's not a problem. I do this ministry out of just a place of calling. So that's the wonderful part of it, is that any financial resources can go to meeting the needs of others. So one of those individuals that I will start with, just to let you know, is Arfin Morris, is planning on planting another church in Pakistan and another school. So they are going to be in need. And I will start the post with putting that need up first. All right? Love you guys. Hope to see you next week.